Alright, so for this video, we're gonna do an face attractiveness on Meghan, who is Prince Harry's wife, and we're gonna see what her facial rating is. So her overall facial rating is a 6. How rare is that? That is 1 in 5.66 people. The percentage of people is a top 17 percentile. The side facial score is a 74%. Her front facial score is a 46%. Her total facial harmony score is a 57%. Her facial dimorphism is a 2.5. I said it was a 3.5, but it's actually a 2.5. Her body fat factors is an 8. Her miscellaneous features is an 8. The tier list is to the right side. Tier 1 is ideal, Tier 2 is near ideal, Tier 3 is normal, Tier 4 is a slight flaw, Tier 5 is a flaw, Tier 6 is a huge flaw, and Tier 7 breaks harmony. Her overall facial assessment breakdown. So these are her best features: great facial convexity from the side view profile. She does have a prominent invisible cupid's bow. She does have a long ramus. Her lip alignment from the side view profile is better than average. And she does also have equal facial thirds that has a slightly longer middle third. So her middle third is just slightly longer than her rest of her thirds, which is ideal. The worst features is the facial features in the front side view is a little bit elongated. Her head shape is on the longer side. Her eyebrows is not upturned enough, and she does have low set cheekbones. Now these are the rarity scores of other celebrities, so y'all can compare. Alright, so her facial dimorphism is worth 20% of her overall facial score. Now she does get our 3 check marks, and the 3 check marks are the eye aspect ratio, the dominant middle third, and the mouth to nose width ratio. The body fat factors is worth 25% of the overall score, and she does have slightly chubby cheeks, ever so slightly, from the front view, so she doesn't get full points for that, but everything is perfect. And her miscellaneous features is worth 15% of the overall score, and she does get a few points taken off for her forehead lines, so she does have a bit of lines on her forehead region. And for her skin quality, she does get -1, and that is because of zits and moles, so an accumulation of that can also add up as well. Now the first measurement is the eye separation ratio. Now her eye separation ratio is a tier 6. Now this is probably one of her biggest flaws, or if not the biggest flaw that she has. And the reason why is because females tend to have longer set eyes instead of closer set eyes. And as you can see, this is closer set. Now it goes from the distance between her pupils relative to the distance between her head width. And at 42.7% is a little bit too low. Ideally, you want to be between 45 to 40, close to 48%, and 42 is just too low. So she does have eyes that are a bit too closer set to each other. Her facial thirds is a tier 1. Tier 1 is perfectly fine. You don't want each third to deviate more than 3% away from 33%. And from this one, as you can see, it does not deviate more than 3% away from 33%. And also her middle third is the longest. Her canthal tilt is not bad at all. This is almost perfect at 5.5 degrees. 5.5 degrees is perfectly fine. It's ideally you just want a slightly more upturned eyes. Her facial width to height ratio, FWHR, measures the facial features in the front view side of her face, and you don't want it to be too elongated. You want it to be more on the compact side, which she is very close at 1.88. Ideally you want to be at 1.9, so this essentially is not bad at all. Her jaw frontal angle is a tier 2 at 99 degrees. 99 degrees is not bad at all. This only indicates that she does have a wider jaw than usual, but this is not bad at all. It's only up by 2 degrees, and 2 degrees is not bad at all, so this is almost perfect. Her cheekbone high settiness, so how high set is her cheekbones? It is at a tier 4 at 69%. 69% means that she does have low set cheekbones, and ideally you want to have high set cheekbones to make the face youthful. Total facial height to width ratio is at tier 3. This only indicates that her head is on the longer side, And this will be perfectly fine for a male, but for a female, this is going to be a little bit on the longer side. But this is not going to be too long to where it's completely noticeable or it's like a flaw or anything like that. It's normal within reason. It's on the more of the longer side for a female because they tend to have shorter faces. Her bigonial width is 92%. 92% means that she does have a wider jaw. So her jaw is wide, and this is very close to what is considered attractive. So this is essentially not bad at all. Her chin to philtrum ratio is a tier 3 at 2.64. What this means is that her philtrum, which is the upper part of her lower third, is a little bit too long for her chin. Now, it might not seem like that because her nose is a little bit droopy, but her philtrum is just a little bit too long. So if her philtrum was a bit shorter, this measurement would be perfectly fine. And her neck width ratio is at a tier 1. This is perfectly fine. And she does also have like a wide jaw, like I said again. So the fact that this harmonizes well with each other is kind of unusual in my opinion. But what this means is that her neck width is perfectly fine for her head shape, and females tend to have necks that are less wide, and males obviously have more wider necks than females, but this is perfectly fine for her. Her mouth to nose width ratio. So this is one of her best qualities or best features in my opinion. Her nose lines up with the inner iris of the eyes or the inner canthus of the eyes, I mean. So her nose lines up with the inner canthus of the eyes, and the lips lines up with the inner iris of the eyes at 1.6, and 1.6 is perfectly fine. This means that not only her nose and lips align well with the eyes, but it also aligns well with each other. So the nose and lips line well with each other, and this is one of her best qualities. So this is very close to what is considered the golden ratio. Her mid-face ratio, so this is the distance between your pupils, and this is going to be relative to the distance between the actual mid-face. So it goes from the eye line all the way down to the upper lip, and hers is at 0.95, which means that her mid-face ratio is a bit on the longer side. So let me get the mouse right here. So this line should literally be the same as this line, but as you can see, this line is a bit longer than this line, and this also is because her eyes, like I said again, are a little bit too close on the closer side of things. So if her eyes were a little bit wider set, this would have been probably ideal. Her eyebrow settiness. So how high set is her eyebrows relative to the actual eye line? And her eyebrows is on the longer side. So if her eyes came down a little bit more closer, it would have been more striking. That's the only reason why the eye settiness matters, is because you want a more striking look. And if her eyebrows were a little bit closer down set to her face, it would have helped with her attractiveness. But this is not bad at all. This is really normal. I've seen plenty of celebrities with eye settings like this, so it's perfectly fine. Her eye spacing, one with eyes test. So her eye spacing, like I said again, her eyes are more on the closer side, so I expect this to be more closer. And hers is at 91%. Now 91% is still not bad, but it's not ideal. You want your eyes to literally be one with eyes apart and not too far from it. And hers kind of shifts away from that just a little bit because it's a little bit more close, but this is still within the normal range. Her eye aspect ratio is a tier 1 at 2.7. So this means that she does have more rounder set eyes, and more rounder set eyes is completely fine. And this is one of her best qualities as well. Her lower lip to upper lip ratio is 1.33. Now this is very close to what is considered to be ideal, but still you want lips that is close to 1.4 or higher than that. Now, if her upper lip was just a little bit more smaller, or if her bottom lip was a little bit more taller, this would have harmonized well with each other. But this is not too bad. This is very close to what is considered to be attractive for a female. Her deviation from her ispolateral alar angle to her jaw frontal angle. Now the ispolateral alar angle, for y'all who don't know, is the angle created from the midface region, as you can see, and it goes from the subnasal all the way to the outer edges of the eyes, and that it should be relative to the jaw frontal angle, so the one that is on the bottom, and it should not deviate more than 5 degrees ideally. And if it deviates more than 15 degrees, that means it's going to be a flaw. And hers is at a tier 2, and it deviates at 7 degrees, so that is slightly outside of that range, which is the 5 degree range I was talking about before. But this is not bad at all. It's just ever so slight deviation from it, but this is pretty good. Her eyebrow tilt is a tier 2 at 7 degrees. 7 degrees is perfectly fine, but it's kind of slightly lower than what you want. If her eyebrows were a little bit more upturned, that will make her face look youthful and more striking, like I said again. And eyebrows is an essential feature, especially for a female, or the eyebrow tilt is an essential feature for a female. But anyway, she does have dark eyebrows, which is ideal for a female. So having dark eyebrows is one of her best features as well. Her bitemporal width, she does have a perfect bitemporal width. It's still on the wider side, but it's still perfectly fine for a female, and is at 90%. 90% means that she does have a lot of forehead exposure, but this is perfectly fine, and this is relative to the width of her face. Her lower third proportions is a tier 1 at 32%. 32% is ideal, so it divides the upper portion of her lower third divided by the rest of her lower third, or all of her lower third. So let me get my mouse. So this whole portion of her lower third is being divided by this small little portion right here, and that's how I got 32%. And it's almost kind of like the facial thirds in a way. You don't want it to deviate 33% away from you don't want it to deviate 3% away from 33%. If it deviates 3% away from 33%, that's when it starts to unharmonize with each other. And so this is one of the measurements that people usually don't fail. So if you can't pass this measurement, I don't know what to say. Her ipsilateral aliar angle is a tier 1 at 92 degrees. 92 degrees is perfectly fine. Like I said again, what saves this measurement is because her eyes is literally like really close set. So that's one of the reasons why this measurement was saved. So her gonial angle is 130 degrees. 130 degrees is slightly outside of what is considered to be an attractive gonial angle for a female. Now, males tend to have sharper jaws. Females tend to have wider jaws. Now, even though they can get away with wider jaws, 130 degrees is not too bad of a gonial angle. But ideally, you want to have a gonial angle that's slightly a bit sharper. But this is perfectly fine for her. Her nasofrontal angle is a tier 1 at 130 degrees. This is perfectly fine. This means that she does have a protrusive brow region. Her mandibular plane angle is 25 degrees. 25 degrees is not bad. Now, ideally, you want your mandible to be almost parallel to the ground, literally almost parallel to the ground. You want it to kind of have a slight deviation, or you want it to kind of go downwards slightly a bit. Not like almost parallel to the ground, but you want it to kind of tilt down just ever so slightly. And based off of this means that she does have a mandible that tilts down ever so slightly, but it tilts down a little bit too much. And I also want to say that line that you see across her cheekbone area is the Frankfurt plane angle. So that's literally the line that's going to be parallel to the ground. So just to give you an idea, her ramus to mandible ratio is a tier 2 at 0.56. So this means that her ramus is just a tad bit short for her mandible, but this is kind of close to what is considered to be ideal. If it was around 59, that would be perfect, but this is kind of just like ever so slightly off. But this is not bad by any means necessary. This is almost close to what is considered. Facial convexity from the glabella is a tier 1 at 147 degrees. Now, this means that her facial convexity is not too flat or not too rounded. You don't want it to be either too flat or too rounded. This is perfectly fine. It just got a little smooth curvature around her face, and 174 degrees is perfectly fine. That is literally within the middle of the distribution. Her submental cervical angle is 90 degrees. Now, it might look a little bit too acute, but you got to remember that her face or her head in this picture, she is looking down. So I'm assuming that if she was to be looking up, this still would have been within the ideal range because she is looking down at 13 degrees. So if I literally add plus 13 to this 90, it still would be within the middle of the ideal range. So I do take that into consideration. So if she was to be looking straight forward, this submental cervical angle would be perfectly fine. And this also indicates that she does not have any submental fat underneath the chin or the jaw region, and she does not also have a high hyoid. Her nasal facial angle is a tier 1 at 32 degrees. 32 degrees is perfectly fine. This indicates if you have a good relationship between the nose and the chin, and it does not take into account her facial convexity. So that's another thing that you do need to know. This means that chin to nose relationship is perfectly fine, and they do align with each other. Her nasal labial angle is a tier 3 at 90 degrees. Now, this means that her nose is actually on the more downswung side of things. Now, she doesn't really have like any crazy lip protrusion, or I guess you could say her jaws doesn't protrude that much, especially for, I think she's black. So usually this is for black females or for black people in general, they do have more protrusive jaws. So their nasal labial angle is going to be a tad bit on the shorter side. But for her to have 90 degrees, this is still on the shorter side, but not too short of an angle. Now, this is not going to be ideal because you want your nose to be more protrusive or more upturned. But this is still not, really bad at all. This is completely normal. And this is not anything to do with, black people or anything like that. There's Asians, there's Hispanics, there's whites that have even lower angles than this. So this is perfectly fine. Her orbital vector is neutral. The bone protrusion underneath your eyes, you want it to be actually past the eyes. And the reason why is because you want your eyes to be more deep set. You don't want your eyes to protrude out from your orbital rims. It just doesn't look ideal, especially from the side view. And it's also visible from the front. So if you have dark circles or if you have extreme eye bags, it will be visible. Her total facial convexity is a tier 1 at 146 degrees. Now 146 degrees is perfectly fine, and you want your total facial, and this also includes your nose protrusion. So it's like the regular facial convexity. The only difference is it includes her nasal protrusion, and this also means that her nose protrusion harmonizes well with her facial convexity. That's all this measurement indicates to me. So yeah, her mental labial angle is a tier 1 at 124 degrees. Now 124 degrees is perfectly fine. What this tells me is that she does have good chin protrusion relative to her bottom lip, and her bottom lip actually have pretty good protrusion as well, so I can kind of see why this will be ideal. Her facial convexity from the nasion is a tier 1 at 170 degrees. Now the only difference between this measurement and the facial convexity from the glabella is that this is going to the nasion, so the top of the nose or the top of the nasal bridge. And 170 is perfectly fine. This means that, her facial convexity is not too flat or not too rounded, and this is perfectly fine. So her facial convexity overall is perfect. Her nasal projection is a tier 1 at 0.55. Now this is at the lower end. Anything lower than this is going to be outside of what is considered to be ideal, but this indicates to me that she does have good nose protrusion, and it's the nose width relative to the nasal bridge. Her nasal width to height ratio projection, so this indicates how lengthy or how long is her nose relative to her face, and 0.91 means that this is kind of slightly off of what is considered to be ideal. Alright, so the next measurement is the rictus elan. So this goes from the nasal tip down to the chin, and you want your bottom lip to be closer to the line than your upper lip, but you don't want both lips to pass the line, so that's the key there. Now this is perfect. Now this literally would be like the best example of what a rictus elan should look like. So yeah, and for a black person to have lip measurements like this is like not usual. It's not common at all. And usually people fail the lip measurements too, so that's what makes it even more crazier. The H line is a tier 1, so it goes from the upper portion of the lip, so the tip of the upper lip down to the chin, and you want your bottom lip to touch or to barely touch the line, which it does for her, so this is perfect. Her S line goes from the middle of the nose down to the chin. I don't know how to really say it. I think it's called the Camilla, whatever it's called, but it goes from the tip of that all the way down to the chin, and you want your upper lip and the bottom lip to touch the line. And as you can see, the upper lip and the bottom lip obviously touch the line, so that's why she gets a tier 1. Now this is the only flaw right here, or not really flaw, but it's kind of slightly off, and I'm gonna explain why. So it goes from the subnasal down to the chin. Now the upper lip is supposed to be more protrusive than the bottom lip, but actually from what I see right now, the upper lip is actually just as protrusive as the bottom lip. So this is not bad at all, but you want your upper lip to be slightly more protrusive. So that's why she doesn't get full points for that. Her nasal mental angle is a tier 1 at 128 degrees. Now let me tell y'all what's the difference between this and what's the difference between the nasal facial angle. Now these two angles pretty much measure the nose to chin relationship. Now the only difference between this measurement, it takes in her facial convexity as well. So it measures the nose and chin protrusion or the relationship between each other, but it also takes in her facial convexity. So like I said again, her chin and her nose have a good relationship between each other, and she does have a very good facial convexity. That's why this is a tier 1. So it's kind of like a combination between those two measurements. Her gonial to mouth relationship is perfectly fine. She does have a long ramus, so I can kind of tell that this is going to be perfect, but it's to measure to see if we have an adequate sized jaw for her face, and she does, because her ramus or her gonium bone, and the gonium bone is pretty much where the two vectors meet. So let me get the mouse real quick. If I can get it right here, this is where the two vectors meet for the ramus and for the mandible, and this is the gonium bone. And the bone is actually beneath the mouth line, so this is perfectly fine for her. Her recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle is perfect. Now, ideally, you want it to be slightly overshooting the nasion, and you want it to pass the glabella. So the glabella is right here at the tip of the brow region, and the nasion is at the bottom of it right here. And you want this to slightly pass both areas. So not only the nasion, but the glabella as well. But this is perfectly fine for a female and male. This means that it lines up at the nasion. So if it was a little bit underneath it, then that would be kind of like a slight flaw. But the simple fact that it's right here is perfectly fine. So yeah. So you want the chin to at least meet up with the nasion, at least bare minimum. Her brow ridge inclination is perfectly fine at 14 degrees, and 14 degrees means that she does have a brow ridge inclination, or good brow ridge inclination, I should say. And this is perfectly fine for a female. And and usually females tend to have less of a inclined brow ridge, I should say. So yeah. Her nasal tip angle is perfect as well. Anything less than this will be outside of what is considered to be attractive, because they tend to have more rounder noses. But this means that she does have a pretty sharp nasal tip, and it's not too sharp to where it's like unideal or it doesn't look attractive or anything like that. But this is perfectly fine. So her nose is not too bulbous or not too rounded. Her lower lip to submental plane angle. So this is another measurement to see if you have any fat underneath the chin, which she does not. And she does have good relationship between her chin and her lower lip at 94 degrees. And this is perfectly fine. And these two measurements don't count. Her inferior third of the face to the lower third of the face proportions is 0.43. Now, the only difference between this and the lower third proportions, which is another measurement, is that this inferior third is the difference between, I'm gonna get the mouse again so I can show y'all. So instead of getting the whole third, is only getting the lower third, and that is being divided by the upper third. So it's the upper third, the whole upper third being divided by the lower third. Now, this is not the same as the philtrum to chin ratio, because the philtrum to chin ratio doesn't include the lip area. This includes the lip area as well. So this is another way of to measure whether to assess if your lower third is has very good harmony with each other. So yeah, so this is just another way, and she does have a perfect inferior third, and is at the lowest range at 0.43. And this one as well, this is perfect as well. So yeah, if y'all want me to rate y'all face, let me know. I will have my email, and I will also have my IG down in the description. And just hit me up. I'll give you the instructions on what to do. And from there, within 24 to 48 hours, you should get your rating. And yeah, so make sure to do that if you're interested. And yeah, I'm out. Peace.